So today we're going to get into section 3, which will be the last covered section of chapter 29. And then for homework tonight, after you watch this video, you will have the section 4 outline, which is sort of how World War I wraps up and talks about the very important Treaty of Versailles. So make sure you're paying attention there. Today, I do have a couple of announcements. I've been noticing that for one, I'm seeing a lot of guys are starting to watch the video, but they're not watching the whole thing. Um, Hey, that's a choice that you're making. I don't think it's the right one, but I would encourage you guys to make sure that you're watching the entire video to make sure that you're getting any additional information that I'm sharing with you. I am giving you the outline, so I know that that is helpful for you, and you can study off of those as well. I'm just trying to make it as much like a real class environment as I possibly can. The one thing I would say is that for my AP students, there are a couple of very important announcements and a couple of very important videos that I've posted that not many of you have checked out. So I really want to encourage you guys to make sure you're looking into that. It's going to talk about the format of the exam, the dates, the testing dates that are for the exam. So if you're in my AP class, please look at the announcements that I've posted on bulletin board, and then also the videos that I've posted on the bulletin board down at the bottom. You'll see links to those video series there. Now, today we're going to take a look at how this really became a worldwide war, many different areas, regions, and countries getting involved. War affects the world is what Roman numeral 1 states, and it starts with what's called the Gallipoli Campaign. Now, if you recall, one of the major problems during World War I was Russia's inability to properly supply their troops. The Allies had a lot of trouble sending them supplies because, simply put, the Germans had great submarine warfare. They were blocking off both the North and Black Sea routes to, get to Russia for the Allies. So what happened is the Allies, mostly led by the British at this time, decided to attack an area of the Ottoman Empire called the Dardanelles. Now, this is on the map on page 851. I'm going to highlight that here with you. What you're going to see down here is you're going to see Greece. This is the Ottoman Empire at the time. Here's Russia. This light green region is Russia here. So you cannot get through this way here. Here, the Black Sea is being defended very well by German coming by land and getting into the Black Sea submarines. And then, of course, the land mass here, Austria-Hungary, Germany, is going to be very difficult to get there as well. The Ottomans are kind of controlling this area, cutting it off. Now, up in the northern area, which would be around this region, the North Sea, they're also cutting that off with submarines. So down in this region, there's a small peninsula region here called Gallipoli, and then there's a region called the Dardanelles, okay? It's a geographic space. I'll circle it here in red so you guys can see exactly where I'm talking about, but please refer to this map in your book. This is where the campaign that we're about to talk about here in the next few moments took place, right here. Okay, switching back. The idea was that they believed that if they could defeat the Turks there at the city of Constantinople and its outlying regions, they could then establish a direct supply chain to Russia. This became known as the Gallipoli Campaign because the Dardanelles was a region located on the Gallipoli Peninsula, which I explained earlier. Now, one of the key leaders, I will tell you, of this Gallipoli Campaign and one of the masterminds behind it was Winston Churchill, who would become a very big player in British leadership in World War II. But this was actually a failure of his. It really cost him a lot of prestige, and it was one of the reasons why it took him a while to get into power. The campaign began in February of 1915, but it was unsuccessful by December of that year. Now, the Allies were defeated by the Turks. Now, the Turks were defending their homeland, so they had a little bit of something to fight for, and the Allies ended up suffering about 250,000 casualties. So this was a major loss. There were also things going on in Africa and Asia. We talked about imperialism. We talked about that playing a big part in World War I. Germany had a lot of colonies in both Asia and Africa. The Japanese were fighting against the Germans in China and also in other regions of the Pacific. So that was kind of their role on the Allied side there. The British and the French were battling with the Germans in northern Africa and other regions in Africa as well. And then the British and French recruited many people to fight or work from the colonies that they had throughout the world, such as India, South Africa, Senegal, Egypt, Algeria, and Indochina, which is Indonesia region today. Now, capital letter C is going to talk about how the United States gets involved. I'm sure that many of you are interested in this. I'll talk about the steps that happened to get the United States into the war. The United States didn't enter the war until very late, after the halfway point, to be honest with you. In 1917, the war began to spill out into the naval regions of the Atlantic Ocean. The Germans were practicing what they called unrestricted submarine warfare. Basically, in 1917, they announced that their submarines were going to sink any ship in waters near Britain without warning, because many countries, mostly the United States, were sending, either blatant or undercover weapons and support to the British at this time. And even before that, the Germans were using their what they called U-boats, submarines, to take out passenger ships and other supply ships as well. One British passenger ship called the Lusitania really sparked a fire in the United States. This attack left over 1,000 people dead, including 128 United States citizens. This outraged the Americans at home. However, it was actually discovered that the Lusitania, a passenger ship, was secretly harnessing weapons and supplies headed to the British from the Americans. American President Woodrow Wilson sent a strong protest to Germany, and after 2 other attacks, they did agree to stop attacking neutral and passenger ships. However, in 1917, the Germans began to do this again. They struck the United States by sinking 3 more U.S.-based ships. The following events, though, were the final and true motivating factors for U.S. involvement. Point number 5, in February 1917, the United States intercepted a telegram written by Germany's foreign secretary, you could say, Arthur Zimmermann. Basically, a telegram is it's communication over a wire. You have different, codes that go over the wire, and you can intercept them. United States did intercept this one. The letter was sent to Mexico, and it basically stated that Germany would help Mexico reconquer the land that they had lost to the United States, basically in the southwest region of the United States, if it would become an ally of Germany. Basically, the plan here, let me talk about this. The plan here was to have Mexico attack the United States. And Germany's goal in doing this was thinking that, hey, the United States will not come to Europe if they're fighting a war on their own land base. So everybody pretty much knew that Mexico was no match for the U.S. But even if Mexico did invade and could occupy certain small regions of the United States, that would keep the United States at home and out of the war in Europe. And so that was the goal with this. Mexico didn't bite on this one, but on April 2nd, 1917, President Woodrow Wilson and the United States entered the Great War, World War I, on the side of the Allies. Now, I think it's pretty obvious why the United States joined the Allies, but I think we need to talk about what happened if the Lusitania didn't happen, if unrestricted submarine warfare wasn't taking place, and if the Zimmermann note never happened. What would it have been the cause? Why would the United States want to join on the Allies' side anyway? Well, I would say this. The American population favored the Allies because they did feel a common ancestry with England. I mean, there's that connection there, historically what has happened. Also, the United States had a lot more ties economically with France and Great Britain. They are closer. They are directly across the Atlantic Ocean. Germany is a little tougher to get to trade with. So economically, culturally, and historically, the Americans had more ties to the Allies. Roman numeral 2, this really became what's called a total war. And when you talk about total war, it means that countries will devote all of their resources to the war effort. It also definitely means that everything in war is fair game, including the killing of civilians. Bombings, things of that nature to reduce morale are fair game when it's total war being declared. For example, also, governments would basically tell factories what to produce and how much to produce. That is something that is sort of going on right now in our world today, but that's really what was going on in World War I. supplies were short. You had to send a lot of the supplies that were necessary for the war away. So rationing became something that was put in place in the United States and in other countries as well. Because goods were in short supply, people were limited in what they could buy. They could only buy small amounts of items that were deemed necessary for the war effort. And in the States and in other parts of Europe, propaganda became huge. One-sided information designed to persuade people to keep up or develop morale for the war. Here's a small example. There are many examples, but here's Uncle Sam down here saying the famous, "I want you for the United States Army." That's a basic recruiting tool that began during these times. Okay, now women. The role of women during the war was very important, and it transcended their future, to be honest with you. Governments turned to women for help in factories, offices, and shops because most of your men were heading off to war. Women did all of the things that men were doing before the war. This was very important for them because they were able to show a lot of people in a lot of ways that they were very capable of completing said work. Many women also worked on the front lines as nurses, a very and extremely important job during this time. These actions by females did not go unnoticed, and that is, quite frankly, one of the big catalysts for why many countries allow women to vote after World War I. Roman numeral number 3, the Allies win the war. First of all, a major withdrawal by Russia. In 1917, Russia actually withdrew from the war due to civil unrest and war-related shortages of food and fuel. The Russian army had lost 5.5 million soldiers. The new Russian leader at the time was Vladimir Lenin. He was a Bolshevik. There was a communist Bolshevik revolution that was led in Russia that overthrew the current ruling family. They did end up signing a peace treaty with Germany in 1918. That treaty was called the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk. Then, even though Russia withdrew, the Central Powers still did have a collapse. Now that Russia was out, though, the Central Powers had won the Eastern Front. The Germans could now send their full force to the Western Front, where they once again began driving France back toward Paris. By May of 1918, the Germans had regained all the land up into the Marne River Valley. This did take a great deal of effort from the German army, and they were severely drained and tired from the constant fighting. Now, the Allied forces did at this time, later in the war, have the help of about 140 fresh United States troops. The Second Battle of the Marne took place, and the Allies were supported by over 350 tanks and 2 million overall troops. The Central Powers were thoroughly routed and then began to surrender here and there, place in place. First was Bulgaria, who was a small player on that side, and then the Ottoman Turks, then Austria-Hungary, and finally Germany. In 1918, Kaiser Wilhelm did step down, and Germany declared itself a republic. Armistice Day, November 11th, 1918, the war was ended when French and German officials signed an armistice. An armistice is simply an agreement to stop fighting. Guys, key message for you here, little special note. If you're watching this video, there's going to be a special assignment posted in the gradebook. And what I want you to do is go ahead in there and in the submit text box, simply write key baller. That is the key word that's going to get you 5 points. Those of you who do that will receive 5 out of 5. Those of you who don't will end up receiving 0 out of 5. Definitely want to make sure that you're watching these videos and doing what I ask and making sure that you're staying along with the class. Thank you. All right, we got a couple more points here. We have the legacy of World War I. So what are some statistical data? What are some things that we want to take a look at about World War I? Very sad notes here. 8.5 million soldiers died. 21 million were wounded. Those numbers are staggering. Many civilians, I can't even count. We don't have total numbers. Civilians died due to starvation, disease, and being slaughtered by enemy forces. The war was estimated to cost about $338 billion in today's world. Farms, homes, villages, entire towns were destroyed. There is a graph about all of this on page 856, I would definitely familiarize yourself with that graph and with that information presented. Guys, thank you very much. Remember, you're doing the outline for section number 4. That is going to be a 10-point assignment. You'll be online submitting that through the gradebook system.